All right, so we're gonna do some bits of the axial skeleton today and then the girdles. So to start with, let's start with the vertebrae. So if you look upwards here, you can see the cervical vertebrae. You can also see your hyoid bone sticking out. So the first two cervical vertebrae, those have special names. Those are the atlas and the axis, okay? The atlas and the axis are special. They allow for rotation of our head, and something very important. Do you see this little thing sticking out here? He's actually coming from the axis. It's called the dens, or you can call it the odontoid process. It comes through where the body would actually be of the atlas. And so what it allows for is movement, okay? So the atlas, the axis, the rest are just called cervical vertebrae, but when we get down to C7, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you turn him around, take you around this way, this one is actually called the Vertebra Prominence because it's a prominent vertebrae. So I'll kind of take you down and you can see him. So if you just count down to 7, you'll see it. Vertebra Prominence, which means it's a very prominent vertebrae. Okay, so those are the cervical vertebrae, okay? And then you also have thoracic vertebrae. So if you count down from C7 and then you go into the next 12, you'll see the thoracic vertebrae, and you can see they are for attachment of the ribs here. And then if we move down even further, you see the lumbar vertebrae. You have 5 lumbar vertebrae, you have 12 thoracic vertebrae, and then you have 7 cervical vertebrae at the top. Okay, so some features of vertebrae in general that I would like you to know. So this is what one looks like, okay? So pretend he's sitting, you know, like this. Spinous process would be out towards the back. And so some features. So you see these guys that go out to the side here? These are your transverse processes. Transverse processes. The one that points out to the back, so if I turn him, do you see these ones pointing out towards the back? These? Like if you were to feel your spine, you would feel those. Those are the spinous processes, okay? So spinous process, transverse process, and then you have these ones. Okay, so the transverse face out, think like a transverse cut, they face out. Spinous towards the back, towards your spine. And then these ones that you see are the articular processes. Okay, so an articular process, articular facet, people call it, you'll see it's where they attach to each other. So let me show you close up here. So put you here. Do you see this attachment here? These two attaching here? Those are the, shows one that's kind of not really attached. Those are the articular processes. Okay, and then the body. The big part, the weight-bearing part is the body. And so you'll notice the further you move down the spine, the bigger the body gets. And that's because it bears the weight. So there's more weight as you move down, which means the body gets bigger and bigger. So the lumbar vertebrae have the biggest bodies, and then the cervical have the smallest. The same thing's gonna change with this vertebral foramen. Okay, so the vertebral foramen is the whole, right? Foramen's always a whole. And so you'll see as the body gets bigger, this tends to get smaller, okay? Because there's really just not enough space. But what runs through there is the spinal cord. Okay. Then the only other feature that you're gonna see is the pedicles. So the pedicles just attach the transverse processes to the body. Okay. So those are the vertebrae. They're pretty easy. As long as you can count 7, 12, and 5, you should be good to go. Now, we don't call them thoracic vertebrae. We call them T1, T2, T3, and then for lumbar, they'd be L1, L2, L3. Okay, next thing is the sacrum. So let me move us down a little bit. Okay, so what you're looking at now is the sacrum. Okay, this guy. So the sacrum used to be actually several bones, but they all fused by the age of 25 to 30. The coccyx is the same thing. It's like what you think of as your tailbone. It used to be separate bones as well, but it's fused by the age of 25 to 30 as well. So you see these little holes in here. Remember, anything we call a hole, sacrum foramina. Okay, and then we see these raised portions here. So this is your median sacral crest. Okay, median sacral crest. And then you see a medial sacrum crest, and then lateral sacral crest, okay? And then also, we see the Eila So these little things that look like wings that come out to the side here, 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 and here, those are the Eila. And then we have a sacral canal. So what the rod is going through right here to hold this guy up, that would be the sacral canal actually. And it ends at the bottom in the sacral hiatus. We can't see it here because we have a rod running through him, but imagine if there wasn't one, that would be where the spinal cord would go through and end. Okay, so that's the sacrum. And then what else do we have? I guess we just have the coccyx. We don't really have any features on him. He's just this little portion. He's this little portion down here. All right, so then let's move into, let's just take a peek at the ribs. Let me move you back up. Okay, so just take a peek at the ribs here. Turn them around to the front. Okay, so the ribs are connected to the sternum. Okay, so the sternum has several parts. So the sternum has the manubrium, the body, and then the xiphoid process. You can see where it ends here, xiphoid process. And attached to the sternum, okay, attached to the sternum is the ribs. And you have 12 ribs. They protect your underlying organs, but they kind of differentiate depending on where they attach. So the first 7 are called, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from here up, they're called true ribs or vertebrosternal ribs. Vertebrosternal because they're directly attached via these costal cartilages to the sternum. So you can see everybody has their own attachment. Now these next 3, okay, 8 through 10 here, these guys are called false ribs or vertebrochondral ribs because they're, remember chondro always means chondrocyte, so this is a costal cartilage here. So chondrocyte, or that's the word we know when we see chondral, right? We think cartilage, and that's because these guys are all attached. You see they don't have their own, they're attached together. So we call them false ribs or vertebrochondral. You also have 2 more false ribs that don't attach to anywhere back here. Let me tip you down. And these guys are your floating ribs. So if you see these 2 and these 2, do you see how they're just floating out? They're protecting your kidneys back here, but they don't attach to anything. So those are your floating ribs. So floating ribs, false ribs, true ribs, attached to the several parts of the sternum, right? So the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process there. Also what we see attached to the sternum is the clavicle. Okay, so the clavicle is this little guy. He's your collarbone, is what people usually call him. And he attaches the sternum to the scapula. Okay, so the sternum, let me sit down. The sternum to the scapula is attached by this clavicle here. The clavicle has a sternal end, which is obviously this end that's attaching to the sternum. And then it has an acromial end. And the acromial end is the end that's attaching to the scapula, and it's actually attaching to a part on the scapula called the acromion. So we'll actually take a peek at that right now. Okay, so this is the scapula. Let me move him kind of right here. Okay, so you see where the clavicle is attaching here, and it's attaching to the acromion, okay? And the acromion, if you just pick up a scapula on the table, the acromion is going to be higher up. You'll see him higher up. He sits above this one, right? So this is the acromion. You also have the glenoid cavity that the humerus fits into. So you see this little kind of curved area here. So that's the glenoid cavity, okay? And the humerus articulates right in there. Also, we have the coracoid process. So you'll see another kind of protrusion sticking out. When you pick up the scapula, you're gonna see 2. You see both these things. Let me move you back. You'll see both these things. The acromion is going to be the one that sits atop. A comes before C. This one is the coracoid process. Ligaments are going to attach here for stabilization of the shoulder. Okay, some other things. If we look on the back, you see this big part that comes across here? That's the spine. That's the spine of the scapula. And so above the spine, you'll see an indentation, and below the spine, you'll see an indentation. So above, supra, right? Supraspinous, so above the spine, supraspinous fossa, infraspinous fossa. So supraspinous, infraspinous fossa. So above the spine or below the spine. There's also going to be a fossa on the front, So there's an indentation. Sorry I didn't grab a scapula out, but if you were to look through here, so on the front anterior side, there's a fossa that's called the subscapular fossa, subscapular, so on the scapula. So the front, subscapular, and then the back ones have to refer to the spine, so supraspinous, infraspinous, okay? Acromion up top, coracoid below, glenoid cavity for the attachment of the humerus, and you are set to go for the scapula. All right, I think the last thing we're looking at is the coxal bone. So I'll move you down here. Coxal bones, right? These are the hips that you see here. Okay, so what are some things we know? So the coxal bone is actually 3 bones in one: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. So the ilium is the really big part that you see. So like when you feel your hip bones, you're feeling the iliac crest here. So the iliac crest, the iliac fossa, see this like smooth groove thing in here? That's the iliac fossa. It's the ilium. If you look at the back side, so like your sit bones, if you look at the back side, that is your sit bones or your ischium. And then together at the front, this is the pubis. So this region up here, ilium, sit bones, ischium, front part where the pelvis is the pubis. Now pubis has something very special called the pubic symphysis. See this little pad here? That's a pad of fiber cartilage. It's good for flexibility. Also some other things that are here, really important, the acetabulum for attachment of the humerus. And then you'll also see these big holes here. Those are the obturator foramen. So foramen's an opening, and those are openings obviously for nerves and blood vessels. There were some other features I wanted you to know, distinctions between the male and the female pelvis. Obviously the female is wider, bigger pelvic inlet and outlet, a broader angle down here. Those are things that I'm not going to cover in this video, but that you should know. So that covers the rest of the skeleton for us. I think you're all set. So good luck.